Karen's screams echoed down the block, even as the officers shoved her into the back of the squad car. The woman who once patrolled the neighborhood with clipboards and threats was now shackled in steel cuffs, her authority ripped away in front of the very people she used to intimidate. The flashing red and blue faded into the distance, but the scars she left behind lingered like smoke after a fire. The neighbors stood in stunned silence. For years they had bowed to Karen's rules, fearing her fines, her letters, her vindictive crusades to control every lawn and mailbox. And now they had seen her for what she truly was, a tyrant, willing to pull a trigger just to feel powerful. Emily stood in the center of it all, calm and unshaken. She hadn't needed to shout, hadn't needed to match Karen's rage with her own. She had stood her ground, and in doing so, revealed the truth. She was more than just another homeowner. She was someone who understood law, justice, and the weight of consequences. As I rushed to her side, I could see it in the neighbors' eyes. Something had shifted. For the first time, they weren't looking at Emily as the outsider, who refused to join the HOA. They were looking at her with respect, even gratitude. "Thank you," one whispered, her voice trembling. Another man shook his head, muttering, "We should have stood up to her years ago." But Emily only offered a quiet smile. "All it took was saying no," she replied. The days that followed brought headlines. HOA president arrested after pulling gun on neighbor. News vans lined the streets, cameras flashing. Reporters swarmed for statements. Maplewood Lane was suddenly the center of national attention, and Karen's fall from power became a cautionary tale about control gone too far. The HOA itself crumbled almost overnight. Without Karen's iron grip, the group dissolved, exposing years of corruption, unfair fees, and intimidation. Freedom returned to the block, not just for Emily, but for everyone who had silently suffered under Karen's rule. As for Karen, her threats echoed in the background of every court hearing, every news update. This isn't the end, she had promised. Maybe she still believed she'd find a way to reclaim control. But the truth was clear. She had lost everything. And Emily? She finally found the peace she was searching for. Not because she had escaped confrontation, but because she faced it head-on. She showed an entire neighborhood that fear only has power if you let it. In the end, Maplewood Lane was no longer Karen's kingdom. It belonged to the people who lived there, free, unafraid, and finally united. And as for my daughter, she walked away not just victorious, but stronger than ever. If that left you stunned, imagine what's still to come. Tap subscribe right now and join us for more unbelievable real-life dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat. And don't forget, share this video, because stories like this deserve to be heard. The moment those police lights hit my windows, the entire party froze. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. The guitar strings stopped buzzing, and kids who had been laughing suddenly stood still, wide-eyed. For a split second, you could feel the tension rise, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Who called the cops? I didn't need to guess. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Karen standing smugly on her porch, arms folded, lips curled into the kind of grin you only see when someone thinks, "They've just won a war." She had summoned the cavalry, confident they would march straight into my yard and drag me out by the collar. But here's what Karen didn't know. This wasn't just any housewarming party. My friends weren't your average guests. My cousin Jake was a police officer. My college roommate Tasha was a detective. Two of my old high school buddies, patrol officers. Even my next-door neighbor's brother was in uniform. And to top it all off, the guest of honor, my best friend from childhood, was none other than Captain Morales, one of the highest-ranking officers in the city's police department. So when those squad cars pulled up, sirens cutting through the night, the reinforcements Karen thought she had called weren't coming to shut us down. They were coming to say hello. The front door swung open, and in walked Officer Daniels, who immediately high-fived Jake, my cousin, before heading to the kitchen to grab a soda. Behind him came two more officers, who broke into laughter when they saw their colleagues already inside. Wait, this is the disturbance call? One of them chuckled, shaking his head. By now, my living room was filled with uniforms. Not angry, stone-faced cops ready to break up a party, but friends, laughing, joking, and blending in like they belonged. Because they did. Meanwhile, outside, Karen's confident smirk faltered. From her perspective, things weren't adding up. Instead of storming into my backyard with handcuffs, the officers were hugging people, clapping shoulders, and grabbing plates of barbecue. I walked outside, waving politely as she tried to maintain her composure. "Everything okay, Karen?" I asked. Her voice wavered. "You can't just have this many people. This violates the HOA guidelines." I gestured to the line of police officers entering my house. "Funny, seems like the city disagrees. You should take it up with them." The look on her face was priceless. Eyes darting, mouth opening but no words coming out. For the first time that night, Karen realized she might have miscalculated, but she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because if Karen couldn't win with the police, she was about to try something much, much worse. If you thought Karen would retreat after realizing half the police force was on my guest list, you don't know Karen. Defeat wasn't in her vocabulary. At least, not one she was willing to admit. So instead of backing down, she shifted gears. I could see her pacing her porch like a general regrouping after a failed attack. She muttered into her phone, gesturing wildly at my house, probably explaining to the HOA board, or maybe the 911 operator, that she had stumbled onto the party of the century. In her mind, this wasn't just about noise or cars parked along the curb. This was about control, and Karen couldn't stand not being in control. Inside, the mood had lightened again. Officers mingled, my cousin Jake manned the grill, and Captain Morales gave a short, joking speech about how this was the safest housewarming party in the state. Everyone laughed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't finished. And I was right. 15 minutes later, Karen marched back across the street, not alone this time. With her came two clipboard-wielding HOA board members, looking nervous but determined, like reluctant soldiers dragged into a battle they hadn't signed up for. Karen didn't waste a second. She pointed at my yard, my guests, the cars lining the street. "This is unacceptable. This violates Section 14, Article 7 of our community guidelines. No more than 5 cars per household guest, no amplified music, no outdoor cooking without prior approval." The board members exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unprepared to enforce rules in front of half the police department. Before I could respond, Captain Morales stepped forward, arms crossed. "Ma'am, we've reviewed the situation. There's no noise violation, no public disturbance, no laws being broken here tonight." Karen's face turned crimson. She jabbed her finger at him. "You don't understand. This is private property under HOA jurisdiction. We can issue fines." The captain didn't flinch. "And you can file whatever paperwork you want. But as far as the city is concerned, this homeowner has done nothing illegal." You could practically see the steam pouring out of Karen's ears. She turned to the board members, desperate. "Well, aren't you going to back me up?" One of them cleared his throat awkwardly. Maybe we should send a notice later?" It was the weakest attempt at authority I'd ever seen, and Karen knew it. Her power play had fizzled, and now she was standing in front of a party full of people, all of whom were watching her unravel. But if Karen couldn't win through rules, and she couldn't win through the police, she had only one weapon left: escalation. And what she did next would turn a petty HOA dispute into a neighborhood legend. Karen wasn't just angry now, she was desperate. Her face was red, her voice cracked, and you could practically hear the gears grinding in her head as she searched for her next move. The HOA board members had already retreated a few steps, clearly regretting ever leaving their couches. But Karen? No, she doubled down yet again. She whipped out her phone, and before anyone could stop her, she was dialing 911 again. Loud enough for everyone to hear, she barked into the phone. "Yes, I'm reporting a dangerous situation. There's an illegal gathering at address." "Yes, illegal. They're resisting HOA authority and—" She lowered her voice dramatically. I think there may be drugs or weapons involved." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few neighbors whispered in disbelief. Even the officers inside exchanged looks of pure exasperation. False reports weren't just petty, they were a crime. Captain Morales calmly stepped outside. "Ma'am, I strongly suggest you hang up that phone." But Karen ignored him. She ended the call with a self-satisfied smirk. "Now we'll see how long your little circus lasts," she sneered. Within minutes, more sirens echoed down the street. But this time, it wasn't just a couple of units. It was nearly a full response team. Squad cars pulled up from every angle, lights flashing, radios crackling. Neighbors poured out of their homes, filming the spectacle on their phones. What had started as a small housewarming was now the biggest scene the neighborhood had ever witnessed. The new officers, unaware of the backstory, approached with caution until they stepped inside and immediately recognized half their colleagues, eating barbecue and laughing in my living room. Confusion spread like wildfire. One officer turned to Morales and asked, Captain, what exactly is going on here?" Morales didn't miss a beat. A false report. Someone called in a fabricated emergency. He shot Karen a look that could cut steel. Karen, realizing her plan had backfired again, tried to spin the story. No, I heard something suspicious. They're lying. They're covering for him because they're all friends." But the damage was done. The officers had seen enough. They calmly informed her that filing false emergency calls was a serious offense. The HOA board members, who had been standing behind her awkwardly, now took several steps back, clearly wanting no association with her meltdown. The crowd of neighbors, phones out, caught every second of Karen's unraveling. She wasn't just losing control anymore. She was becoming the neighborhood spectacle, the punchline to a story that would be told for years. And as the officers turned toward her with notebooks in hand, ready to take her statement, Karen realized she was no longer the accuser. She was about to become the accused. The night that began as a simple housewarming had now become a neighborhood-wide event. Dozens of people stood on sidewalks, phones recording, whispering about how Karen had single-handedly summoned more flashing lights than the 4th of July parade. But what happened next would cement this night as legendary. The lead officer from the second wave approached Karen calmly, notebook in hand. "Ma'am, did you place the call reporting weapons and drugs at this residence?" Karen straightened her posture, trying to reclaim her authority. "Yes, because it's true." "You have to believe me. Look at them. They're all covering for each other. This entire party is a setup." But instead of nodding, the officer shook his head. "Ma'am, we've searched the premises. There are no weapons, no drugs, and no disturbance that warrants emergency response. Filing a false report like this is a serious violation of the law." The crowd collectively oohed. Cameras zoomed in. Karen's smugness evaporated. That's ridiculous," she sputtered, her voice cracking. "I was protecting the community." Captain Morales stepped forward, his tone firm but measured. "You weren't protecting anyone. You wasted valuable resources. You disrupted an entire shift of officers, and you tried to weaponize law enforcement against your own neighbors." The HOA board members were practically sinking into the pavement, trying to disappear. One of them muttered, "We really don't support this," before speed-walking away, leaving Karen completely isolated. At that point, the officer explained her options. She could either cooperate and accept a formal warning, or face charges for misuse of emergency services. The look on Karen's face said it all. She had marched into battle with an army of imaginary rules, and now she was standing alone, surrounded by neighbors who had witnessed her every blunder. The final nail in the coffin came when one of the officers chuckled, pointing to the grill. "Actually, this is some of the best brisket I've had all week." He grabbed another plate, and soon others followed. My housewarming had officially turned into a block party, with law enforcement as the star guests. Karen, on the other hand, retreated to her porch, humiliated. Her phone buzzed nonstop, texts, probably from HOA members horrified at the spectacle, but she didn't answer. She just sat there, fuming as the party carried on louder and happier than ever. By the time the last guests left, one truth had become clear. Karen had tried to ruin my celebration, but she had only made it bigger, better, and far more memorable. Instead of shutting me down, she'd given me the best story to tell for years to come. And as I closed my front door that night, I couldn't help but smile. Karen had called the cops, but it was her reputation that got arrested. So if you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, subscribe for more unbelievable chaos, and drop a comment below. Until next time, stay safe, stay smart.